Hey guys, what's up? It's Lainey, and today I'm doing a book video because it's been a long time since I've done a book video. I wanted to go through my 5 recent favorite reads that I've had over the past few months because I really like these books that I read and I haven't talked about them. So these are in no particular order. This is just the furthest away I've read to the most recent I've read. The first one is going to be To Kill a Kingdom by Alexander Christo. This is a YA fantasy book. It's a really dark book about a siren who, it's a little bit like a Little Mermaid retelling. I don't like saying that it is because I usually don't like Little Mermaid retellings or anything with like mer people in it at all. I don't usually like those books, but on a craft writing level, it's just perfect. So Lyra is supposed to be the next sea queen, and her mother is the sea queen, and the mom's pretty horrible. She's really abusive towards Lyra. Lyra likes to collect hearts of princes, and she has like 16. It's been a while since I've read that, but she has like 16 at the beginning, and she gets one she shouldn't have before her 17th birthday, and her mom gets really pissed about this. So she sends Lyra up to the land to get the heart of the prince that is specifically trying to hunt Lyra. She's turned into a human, and it kind of goes from there. It's told in dual perspective. I really love this book. I listened to it on Audible. It had to be like my second favorite audiobook I've read all year, and if you've been following my channel, you know I've read a lot of audiobooks this year. Really loved everything about the characters, also the adventure, because it's an adventure story and I love adventure stories. I highly recommend this book to anybody who kind of likes dark YA fantasy with a little bit of a twist. There's some, you know, obviously some romance in there, and the adventure is just worth it. Plus it's a standalone, and just based off the world that Alexander Christo like really created, it could definitely have a lot of companions because there were so many kingdoms that she referenced that I'm like, ooh, I would really like a book there. So there's just like a lot of really cool things going on in the book that I think you'll really like. The second book that I'm mentioning I actually read during Smutathon, but I wanted to include it in this video anyway because it really was a great book, and that is Roomies by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren has really become one of my favorite romance authors this year. It's a co-authorship, obviously Christina and Lauren. I really loved this book. It's also a standalone. It follows a young woman who has an English degree, so I was like felt really represented in this book, and she's doing things that she doesn't want to do in New York City, and she's kind of helping her uncle, who is this huge Broadway star. There's this Irish street musician that she always sees. She tries to help him become like a Broadway star under her uncle, but finds out that he's actually here in the United States illegally, and then they end up deciding that they should just get married so that he can get a green card and that he can perform on Broadway. Obviously the green card thing is a huge issue in being here illegally, and I've seen some people talk about how they had an opportunity to have someone who isn't Irish because, I mean, especially when it comes with everything that's going on in this country, but to be honest, the book is written by 2 white women. That's what I preferred them doing an Irish guy or whatever. If it was like a person of color that was here illegally, is it really their story to tell? I think there is maybe a person of color author that could write a story like that. Personally, I was fine with the person who was here illegally was white. Anyway, I really liked that book and it's supposed to be a movie, I believe, that's coming out. And I'm really excited for that too. The next book that I'm going to mention is going to be Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I actually read this book for the first time when I was 17 years old, so 10 years ago. This was the book that really inspired me to write. It showed me that I could write dark things, and I just really loved Sharp Objects, and then I decided to reread it because I wanted to watch the HBO miniseries that was starring Amy Adams, so I wanted to reread it before I watched the show, and I really loved it even the second time around. If you don't know what Sharp Objects is about, it's about this young woman who has her issues. She is a journalist in Chicago, and she is kind of called back to her really small hometown because there has been disappearances and murders of young girls. So her editor wants her to go back because she knows the town, and when Camille, who's the main character, when she goes back, there's just like a lot of things that go on, and she's trying to figure out pretty much what has happened to these girls and who is the killer. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It has everything I really love. It has really damaged characters, really interesting family dynamics. It's also revolving around a crime and murder and everything like that. What's interesting about the family dynamics is because Camille has a horrible relationship with her mother, and there's like a point in the book where the mom like basically tells Camille that she's never loved her daughter, and it just hurt me so much. And it's like wildly different than my relationship with my mom, because like my mom is one of my best friends, and we have a really great relationship. So reading about mothers and daughters who don't get along just like really fascinates me, because that's something that is like so far different than my experiences with my mom. And then the last two books I'm going to mention are dark romances, because your girl has a problem. So if you don't like dark romances, you don't have to watch the rest of this video. But the first one is going to be a duology that I read. I think it's called the Trust Fund duology, but the first one is called Survival of the Richest by Skye Warren. Skye Warren is one of my favorite romance authors. I mentioned her in my romance recommendation video that I did earlier this year, and I just really love her more recent things. I don't really like a lot of her older stuff, but the ones she's been like putting out this year have been like really, really good, and I really enjoyed them. So Survival of the Richest is very heavily influenced by a love triangle, and I don't read a lot of dark romance love triangles where it's like you really don't know who she's gonna go for. And like, trust me, I was like so stressed out when I was reading both these books, because the first book ends like not so much on a cliffhanger, but like nothing's really decided. So like when you go into the second book, you're like, who's this bitch gonna choose? There was obviously one that I really, really wanted her to choose because he was my favorite character. Basically takes place in this fictional town. The guy that she has history with is actually her stepbrother, who she was they were only step siblings for like a year before her dad like divorced his mom. But he's always kind of kept the stepbrother, Christopher, under his wing, because he was kind of like the son he never had. And when her dad dies unexpectedly when she's a teenager, he puts Christopher in charge of his estate. So even though she is supposed to get all of the funds, the father told Christopher that he needs to be in charge of it so she doesn't overspend. So she hates him for several reasons, including the fact that he's in control of her trust fund. Obviously that's a setup for something that I'm gonna want to read. And then the other guy that gets introduced is Christopher's business partner. A whole bunch of just like drama. I really, really love that duology, mostly because it like brought out a lot of like anxiety for me, because I really like when I get emotionally invested in a character and then they become like my ride or die, and if something happens to them, I have issues. But obviously, if you can't tell, I really liked the relationship she had with her stepbrother, because there was history there and they show a lot of like the history between them and stuff, so I really liked that. And then the last book that I wanted to mention is one I just actually finished a couple days ago, and this is kind of the reason why I wanted to do this video. This is actually the second book in a series. I'm gonna say series because it seems like they're setting it up to be a really big companion series. This is a series that is co-authored by Skye Warren, who I just mentioned, and another author, romance author, Anika Martin. And I've never read any of Anika Martin's like solo books, but I plan to because I really like the books that they write together. I mentioned the first book in this series in my romance recommendation video. It was called Prisoner, I think. It had to do with a prison break, so yeah. So there's like a criminal and then just like a normal girl, I guess. There was like a road trip as well, so I really liked that aspect of it. So then they released the second book earlier this year, or middle of this year, I forget. I couldn't wait to read the second one. I started reading it like a couple weeks ago, and it took me a while to get through it because there was a lot of things going on with my writing and stuff, but every time I sat down to read it, I was like really loving it. Like, okay, so the guy, his name's Stone, and he has like, I'm pretty sure he's like brown hair and everything like that, but while I was reading this book, I ended up watching The Guest, and Dan Stevens is the guy in that movie. And if you follow me on Instagram, I was like thirsting over him in my Insta stories. Basically, after I watched that movie, Dan Stevens ended up being the guy I was picturing in this book. I guess, did I even mention what the book was called? It's called Hostage. Despite not being the right look, he ended up being my Stone. There's a bigger conspiracy going on. Do I think you need to read both books? I don't know. I think you could probably read the second book, but just know that you're getting a lot more context and backstory if you read the first book, because the backstory of all the guys is really brought out in the first book, so you kind of know what you're getting into in the second book. They're obviously criminals, but they're trying to get revenge on the people that wronged them when they were children. That's kind of like the overall plot. And then they keep mentioning all these like guys. I don't even know how many we're up to at this point, but like this whole like little band of brothers, there has to be like 8 of them or something. I don't even know. They all started kind of blending together in my head, but I'm hoping like if they do a third book, which I feel like they will, they'll just like keep going through the whole list eventually. There was like a few that like stood out to me where I'm like, I wonder what his story is. Those are my favorite books that I've read so far in the past few months. I'm planning on doing another like romance recommendations video soon because I've been reading a lot of romance all year. I could probably compile them into a video. I also plan to do my favorite romance authors video. That's gonna be hopefully coming soon. My name is Lainey. I make videos on books and writing, so if that interests you, definitely subscribe down below. That's it for me, and I hope you guys all have a really great day. Bye!